This is Lucifera.
Hello, this is Entropy. Today I and Lucifera are going to be discussing some of the antagonists, the bad guys, those who are cast as the bad guys in different movies, and how their ideology actually corresponds to our ideology in many ways, and also, I imagine, the ideology of many of you who will be listening to this video. Now, since the foundation of storytelling, many of us have felt sort of, an appeal for the antagonists of many stories. We resonate with their character. Many times, the antagonist of the story is capable of doing things that we ourselves are too the word would be cowardly to do ourselves. And in that, often enough, we actually find that we have respect for the character who is cast as a bad guy. Oftentimes, those of us with more esoteric understanding of these things can see that whether it's consciously or subconsciously, the writer of these stories are telling us something that might be exactly opposite of what most people get from the story. It's for those of us who have a deeper spiritual understanding. A good example of this is the story in Genesis of the serpent and the Garden of Eden,
which we've discussed in previous videos.
We discussed this ad nauseum in previous videos, so there's no reason to go into it again. But if you look at that story from an entirely different perspective, you can see quite clearly that the serpent in that garden is not the antagonist, but the protagonist of the story. Before we get into the movies themselves, I want to reference, and we'll put it down here. We'll put a link to it down in the description box. We did a video about the Baphomet. Now, the Baphomet, of course, now is associated with such evil. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about the Baphomet, except to say that although it appears to be evil, the Baphomet, in fact, is not. The Knights Templar used the Baphomet to represent the divine feminine Sophia. And again, I'm not going to get into that because we discussed this in a previous video. You'll find the link down there in the description box. This is really the essential point of this video. Not everything that seems to be evil is in fact evil. And also, we all have a purpose. And even what evil is, if you want to use that term, has its purpose to move us forward to balance in this universe. This is, as we have said ad nauseum, Lucy and I, what she and I represent. We don't represent good. We don't represent evil. We represent balance. That appeals more to my quote-unquote Zen mind than many of those who aren't quite familiar with that sort of way of thinking. It's all about balance. You have to maintain a balance within your life. And even the universe itself, this world and the universe, has a life force. And if it's not in balance, the balance must be maintained. It has to be, things naturally want to move into a state of balance. So if there's too much of one thing, then the other will have to take place in order to balance it out. But getting into the movies, first we are going to discuss an older movie, Star Trek Generations. Came out in 1994. Some of you may be too young to really remember this movie, so you might want to go back and watch it again. If you haven't seen it before, I recommend it, even if you don't like science fiction or Star Trek. Simply because the character who plays the villain, the man, Dr. Tolan Soren, played by Malcolm McDowell, this is one of the best villains that you're going to see in just about any movie. And I personally identify with him on so many levels. Now, the story of the movie goes that Malcolm McDowell is trying to get back into something that they refer to as the Nexus or the Ribbon. This, to me, is a very good representation of how I perceive what Buddhists call nirvana. I would describe nirvana this way. Most people understand, or at least try to understand, the concept of heaven. Well, nirvana is not heaven. Heaven is like this. This is the best way I can describe this. Heaven is like a really, really wonderful vacation. You go on vacation, you're there for weeks, maybe, if you can afford it. You enjoy yourself. It's a lot of work sometimes to be on vacation. Any vacation that you take, no matter how much you enjoy it, after a couple weeks, you're pretty exhausted of your vacation. Then, Lucy, at that point, when you're exhausted of your vacation, where do you want to go?
Return home.
Of course, you want to go back home. So, heaven is like that wonderful vacation. But nirvana is home. It is for me. So that is how I describe nirvana. Now, in this movie, Malcolm McDowell is going to do whatever he can to get back into that ribbon, back into nirvana. And can anyone blame him? Can anyone possibly blame him? The story, once he's in the Nexus, pretty much goes to crap, quite frankly. A whole bunch of catch-22s involved with the plot after that point. So, you know, if you've never seen the movie, of course you're going to want to watch the whole movie. But just let me tell you, the last hour or so of the movie, the second half, if it were a 5-act play, I guess you would say the fourth act, pretty much goes to crap. But here we have someone cast as evil, when as far as I'm concerned, all he wants to do is not only suck himself back into the Nexus, the ribbon, nirvana, but he wants to bring everybody else he can with him. So here we have someone cast as a bad guy when he really isn't. Even the people who die because of what he's doing would be, if this great Nexus is this spiritual understanding of nirvana, even they would be brought into the Nexus. So it's an enjoyable film just to see Malcolm McDowell in it. When he's not on screen, it's okay, and the last hour is sort of not. But I do recommend it just to see Malcolm McDowell play this so-called villain. Next, we'd like to talk about the Bane character in the Batman movie The Dark Knight Rises. This is a movie with classic lines for Bane. One of the more interesting ones comes from him from the very beginning of the movie when he first exposes himself.
It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our plan.
Bane says at the beginning of the movie, it doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our mission. And I would have to say the same thing. It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our mission.
This isn't about personality. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this. That's ego. Ego is the enemy. The real Satan is ego. I've discussed this also in a video called Satan, an Autobiography, that you can find both on my channel and on Lucy's. It doesn't matter who we are. It matters what our mission here is. So, what is Bane's mission? Is it just to cause destruction and havoc just for destruction and havoc's sake? No. Bane's intention and the people around him is to bring about justice to those who have, on the backs of the poor, on the backs of the weak and disenfranchised, have made lot of money, accumulated money for themselves. Now this is something many of us who don't have all that riches can relate with. But there's more to this than that. Looking at a scene later in the movie, Bane is asked, "Who are you?" And his response is absolutely the best line I have heard in a movie in a very long time, and delivered so very well.
What are you? I'm Gotham's reckoning. Here to end the borrowed time you've all been living on.
He says, "I am Gotham's reckoning, here to end the borrowed time you have all been living on." Now, from a biblical perspective, since this is what most of us know, most of us were raised with some biblical understanding of angels and things like that. From a biblical perspective, there are angels who bring joy and messages from on high, and there are angels who bring destruction. Gotham, metaphorically, allegorically, is the perfect representation of what the Bible refers to as Babylon. And of course, Gotham is supposed to be a literal representation of New York City. And Babylon in the Bible would be New York, or if you want to look at it at a more larger scale, America, the United States of America. So let's look at a Bible verse. Revelation chapter 18, verse 10.
Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Are
those angels who are supposedly doing the will of God destroying this modern day Sodom, Gomorrah, are they evil? Are they? Yet you have Bane here, who is supposed to be the villain, but all he's really doing is wreaking judgment, just judgment, upon Babylon. Look at these with much deeper spiritual understanding. You can see how these things are allegorical towards our future. And I don't necessarily even mean just towards the future of this planet, but towards the future for those of you who resonate with what I'm saying.
I like the scene where Bane stands in front of the prison and sets the prisoners free. Metaphorically, this is what we're doing.
And when you look at it literally as well, there are so many people in prisons in this country over nonsense, absolute nonsense. And it's going to come a time when there's going to be a reckoning to the people who have imprisoned them, and it's going to be at the hands of the prisoners.
Even the rich were cast out into the streets.
This reckoning is coming. It's coming to this country. And you're going to see it, and you're going to see it soon. Now, let's go to another movie in which the bad guys are cast. This one, to me, is one that really resonates with me, and one in which the bad guys are absolutely doing nothing wrong as far as I'm concerned. This is a more recent movie, The Dark World, and Thor: The Dark World, and the villains in this movie are called the Dark Elves. Now here is the objective of the Dark Elves. They are going to destroy the material universe with a weapon they call ether. Now, what is ether? You look up the word, it's spelled a little differently, pronounced exactly the same. What is ether? Well, you look it up from Wikipedia here. The Greek word ether derives from an Indo-European root, aeth, burn, shine. Blavatsky also related the ideas to the Hindu prana principle, the vital life-sustaining force of living beings present in all natural processes of the universe. The book I have been reading about the philosophy of chaos, which I will be doing a video on in a couple of days, refers to this as Kia. Again, the vital life-sustaining force of living beings present in all natural processes of the universe. So that's what ether is. This is their so-called weapon, these so-called villains. Now, I mentioned Blavatsky before in the last video. Blavatsky is the person who started the Luciferian movement. She is the one that so many people look towards to being the one who really started what we now call New Age. She has also been wrongly associated with the quote-unquote evil that these esoteric groups like the Masons and the Rosicrucians and other groups that are so widely condemned foolishly by these. Blavatsky and Luciferianism is widely condemned by these idiotic conspiracy nuts who know about as much about Blavatsky and Luciferianism as I do about brain surgery.
Well, Blavatsky is not actually the founder of Luciferianism, but there are a lot of Luciferian there's a lot of Luciferian philosophy in her books.
She established the, what is it called, the Luciferian Trust.
No, actually, Lucis Trust was established by Alice Bailey. It was after Blavatsky.
Well, it's basically, Blavatsky is considered by many to be the founder of this idea, if not specifically. But going back to the movie, now let's look at the so-called protagonist of this movie, Thor. Now, what does Thor want to do? Thor wants to stop the Dark Elves because Thor wants to maintain the physical, the carnal universe, and the Dark Elves want to put an end to this physical universe and put it back to its original formless, ether, spiritual state. So, here again, we have something that, to me, metaphorically represents the void, which is the English translation of the word nirvana. Again, we have something. This one, again, spoke to me when Lucy and I went to see this. So, in other words, the Dark Elves are working for our original spiritual state. I think our bird is working for the demiurge. Anyway, okay, where was I? In other words, the Dark Elves are working for our original spiritual state, which is, oh jeez. In other words, the Dark Elves are working for our original spiritual state, which is nirvana, and Thor and his little buddies are working to maintain the physical, or the carnal, the sensual material state. The Dark Elves, okay, we've got it, are trying to put the universe back to an ethereal, which is just another name for spiritual. And Thor is only interested in the carnal. So here we have another villain, so-called villain, that from the Thor: The Dark World movie. This is actually a pretty good movie all the way through. So it's another movie I recommend. And now, if you've already seen it or if you haven't seen it, you can see it from a different perspective. Let me tell you something. At least in this movie, for sure, the Dark Elves are the good guys.
You see these characters in the movies go about doing their mission, and they're portrayed as the villain. Now, in the same way, we are doing our mission, and we are constantly demonized. We are the Satan, the Antichrist, the monster for a lot of people, because we're bringing something that a lot of people are afraid of.
Everything is on its head. The Christians are cast as the good guys. Well, when I'm not speaking about any specific Christian, because there's good Christian people, but I should say Christianity and Christendom is cast as this great being of light, when all it is a false light at best. So it's all on its head.
And we are, like I said, we are cast as the bad guy. I mean, we're constantly called evil. I mean, evil is a very strong word. I mean,
exactly. And you know, it doesn't particularly make you feel good when you have to butt your head against the wall constantly trying to explain what you're explaining, and then having so many people go against it.
And like I said in the Rising Phoenix video, the system basically says you are either for us or against us, and you are a terrorist. We are in that boat. I mean, they're demonizing us. They're basically calling us the terrorists, the evil ones, the villains.
So that's why we can identify with some of these villains in Hollywood movies. Well, the call is going out to those of us, and it's not Lucy and my call. It's a call from the Spirit itself that's coming out there to those of you who've had your gut full. I know I have. And what are you going to do about it is the next question. So I hope that my video, or maybe I'll do more than one probably, discussing a book that I am just about finished reading. And I'll be putting out a video within the next few days about the philosophy behind chaos and how chaos is the essential root of where we all come from. And as you can tell with this bird chirping in the background, it's pure chaos. But here's our video ending this two-part series about Hollywood and movies. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope to find a few of you who will actually want to sit through my next video that I'll be doing, depicting more of the of what appeals to us, for the lack of a better word, dark-siders types. Those of us who work in the dark in order to protect and guide towards the light. So, this is Entropy 666 signing out.
And this is Lucifera.
You all have a good evening and a good rest of the weekend. Goodbye.